Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Hockey Talk with TG Podcast. I'm Ty Glenn. Hope you guys are having a great Thursday. We're going to recap some of the free agency news that happened on Wednesday afternoon or Wednesday morning if you're in Central Time or Pacific Time. But if you're in Eastern Time, then in this case, Wednesday afternoon for you guys. But for those who are in Central or Pacific, then I guess Wednesday morning. But we're going to break down all the free agency extravaganza and the free agency palooza that happened on Wednesday. We saw a lot of signings. We saw some trades. We saw a whole lot of stuff. And we're going to go ahead and talk about that right now. We're not going to stall for any longer. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. We'll start off with talking about Sergei Bobrovsky signing a contract extension with the Toronto Maple Leafs. He signs a 3-year, $7 million contract extension with the Toronto Maple Leafs on Wednesday. One of the biggest goalie signings of the free agency that happened on Wednesday. Of course, we talked about on the preview episode of free agency on the Hockey Talk with TG podcast how his time in Florida has come to an unfortunate end. Again, still can't wrap my head around why he didn't want to stay with the Panthers, but the Panthers already solved their goaltending tandem and adding Jacob Markstrom and Akira Schmidt. Of course, we talked about that on last episode of the Hockey Talk TG podcast, so make sure to check that out if you haven't already. Yeah, new contract extension for Sergei Bobrovsky for the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's going to start this upcoming 2026-27 season and will run through the 2028-29 season, and he'll be a UFA in 29 and 40 years old, which probably he might retire by then, but not sure. He became one of the highest profile unrestricted free agents available after leaving the Florida Panthers, and of course Sergei Bobrovsky reunites with Anthony Stolarz, who of course you guys may know. Sergei Bobrovsky and Anthony Stolarz was the goaltending tandem in Florida when the Panthers went all the way to the 2024 Stanley Cup final and won the Stanley Cup against the Edmonton Oilers. So it was Sergei Bobrovsky and Anthony Stolarz during the Florida Panthers 2024 Stanley Cup run. And now they're going to be reuniting with the Toronto Maple Leafs. And then, I don't know if Dennis Hilleby was traded. I think he was traded on Wednesday. But if he's not traded, I may go back and look at this. But I believe he was traded on Wednesday. But I'm not entirely sure. But again, I might go back and look at it. But I was going to say, if they didn't trade him, I would probably just send him down to the AHL, play for the Toronto Marlies, who of course won the Calder Cup, by the way. Unfortunately, it was against the Chicago Wolves. But I will send him down to the Toronto Marlies and just have Sergei Bobrovsky and Anthony Stolarz as the goaltending tandem for the Toronto Maple Leafs, who of course was the goaltending tandem for the Florida Panthers. And then if Sergei Bobrovsky or Anthony Stolarz is going to get injured, I would call up Dennis Hilleby. That's how I would have called. That's how I would have put it if Dennis Hilleby wasn't traded. But I believe he was traded on Wednesday. I just can't think of what team. But if he's not traded, then that will be the solution I would do. But Sergei Bobrovsky, he brings that championship pedigree to Toronto. Of course, he won back-to-back Stanley Cups with the Florida Panthers in 2024 and 2025. He is a two-time Vezina Trophy winner, winning the Vezina Trophy for best goaltender in 2013 and 2017. Both of those being with the Columbus Blue Jackets. And the Toronto Maple Leafs, they missed out on the playoffs last season, looking to get back into the playoffs this season, and they solved their goaltending tandem. Sergei Bobrovsky also brings in veteran experience to this team, looking again to get back in the postseason. And his resume is really elite. Like I said, he's a two-time Stanley Cup champion, two-time Vezina Trophy winner. His 456 regular season wins ranks 7th all-time among NHL goaltenders, and he's played in 806 regular season games with the Flyers, Blue Jackets, and Panthers. He has a .456, .266, and .58 record with a 2.61 goals against average and a .912 save percentage and 53 shutouts in 806 games. 791 of those games he has started, and his 61 career playoff victories are tied for 15th all time in NHL history. So, not bad stats from Sergei Bobrovsky. And of course, he himself is trying to bounce back from what was a tough season for the Florida Panthers. Taking a look at Sergei Bobrovsky's stats from last season, he had a 27-23-1 record with a 3.07 goals against average and a .877 save percentage. Overall thoughts on this one? Like I said in last episode of the Hockey Talk TG podcast, where I made a bold prediction saying that Sergei Bobrovsky will sign with the Toronto Maple Leafs, I did say that the move was risky, but I also said it was logical. So it's a risky move, but it's also a logical move, and it's a worthy move, and I believe that it will help get the Maple Leafs back into playoff contention. Now, I'm not saying they will go all the way to the conference finals, because they haven't done that since 2002. And I sure as heck am not saying that they'll go to the Stanley Cup final, because they haven't been to the Stanley Cup final since 1967. And that was the last time the Maple Leafs won the Stanley Cup. So I'm not saying that they'll make it that far. They'll probably make it to at least the second round and be eliminated. But yeah, that's how I see it going. But I think it's going to be a good move, and I think this should get the Maple Leafs back in playoff contention. I'm excited to see. I'm hoping to see Panthers versus Maple Leafs playoff matchup with the former Florida Panthers goaltending tandem in 2024 in Sergei Bobrovsky and Anthony Stolarz, and then the current Florida Panthers goaltending tandem for this upcoming season and Jacob Markstrom and Akira Schmid. And I'm wondering to see who will come out on top, which probably would most likely be the Panthers. The Panthers, man, I'm getting sidetracked. It's most likely going to be the Panthers that come out on top if the Panthers and Maple Leafs were going to square off in the Stanley Cup playoffs in 2027. Could even see the Lightning go at it against the Maple Leafs in the playoffs, or maybe in the Boston Bruins. So much teams that the Maple Leafs could face off against if they were going to make it into the playoffs, which maybe they will. Guy McKenna's first year in the NHL will be in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So we'll just have to see. The Maple Leafs also made other moves in this free agency, signing Colton Sissons, who of course was on the Golden Knights during their 2026 Stanley Cup final run. They signed Teddy Bluger from the Vancouver Canucks, I believe, Jack Roslovic from the Columbus Blue Jackets, and Zach McEwen from the New Jersey Devils. Oh, I'm sorry, Jack Roslovic was on the Edmonton Oilers, but he did play for the Blue Jackets in his career. So they got Colton Sissons from the Golden Knights. They got Teddy Bluger from the Canucks. They got Jack Roslovic from the Oilers and Zach McEwen from the New Jersey Devils. So they're trying to sign some depth players and players who could probably contribute on this Toronto Maple Leafs team. But let's get into the other free agency signing, big free agency signing in the Vegas Golden Knights. The VGK Vegas Golden Knights signing defenseman Rasmus Andersson to a long-term 7-year contract deal, 7-year, $8.5 million contract deal. We saw this deal coming. I made a bold prediction about it on last episode of the Hockey Talk with TG podcast. I knew a long-term extension was coming. Of course, Rasmus Andersson was acquired by the Golden Knights from the Calgary Flames last season in the trade with them. And usually the Golden Knights, like I said in the last episode, they don't make these long-term sign extension deals until they see that the player is actually worth it. And they picked him up from the Calgary Flames, wanted to see what he's made of. He did really good in the regular season. He did okay in the playoffs. I know, particularly in the Stanley Cup Final, he had some defensive lapses. But overall, he had a solid playoffs for the Golden Knights, and he did really good in the second half of the regular season for the Golden Knights. So they So Kelly McCrimmon sees Rasmus Andersson as a cornerstone defenseman and someone who could be a part of the future for the next few years for the Vegas Golden Knights. So like I said, the Golden Knights don't go out and make these trades for nothing and lose these players in free agency and just lose them for nothing. They're going to be aggressive and they're going to sign these players long term, keep them locked up on their team, and that's what they did with Rasmus Andersson. This contract will run through the 2032-33 NHL season. And like I said, Rasmus Andersson has strong production this season. Like I said, they're really good with the Golden Knights. He finished the regular season with 47 points, 17 goals, 30 assists for 47 points this season. 17 of those 47 points were with the Golden Knights, where Rasmus Andersson had 7 goals, 10 assists for 17 points in 33 games with the Golden Knights. Last season, he averaged 23 minutes and 12 seconds of ice time per game. And like I said, he had a okay playoffs. It wasn't the best postseason for him, obviously, but he recorded 6 assists in the postseason, providing that steady two-way play throughout the playoffs, and his ability to log in those heavy minutes against top competition made him an integral part of this Golden Knights defensive corpse to come. So like I said, Golden Knights are not going to lose him for nothing in free agency. And his offensive ability, his heavy workload, and his playoff experience make him one of the franchise foundational players moving forward. So a good signing from the Golden Knights, because he was my top prize in free agency going into this free agency Wednesday morning. He was the top prize. He was the guy. Now, if we saw the big names of what we thought we were going to see this year in Connor McDavid, Jack Eichel, Kirill Kaprizov, I think Quinn Hughes, and all these other big superstar names, then he would have just been a random player for the taking. But he was the guy. He was the top player. He was the top prize. And the Golden Knights went out and got that top prize in free agency. So, absolute W of a signing from the Golden Knights. But let's get into another defenseman contract signing. And I can probably tell you guys this one very well. Bowen Byram signs a long-term contract extension with the Chicago Blackhawks on Wednesday. It is a 6-year, $12.5 million AAV contract deal that he signed with the Blackhawks. And that contract extension will begin in the 2027-28 season. It will run through the 2032-33 season, making Byram one of the cornerstone defensemen of this franchise rebuild. So, of course, he came to Chicago to be a top 1 offensive defenseman. He didn't get that role in Colorado, although he won the Stanley Cup with the Avalanche in 2022, but he didn't get the role that he wanted. He didn't get it with the Buffalo Sabres. He made the playoffs with the Sabres. I believe he had 13 points in the playoffs for the Sabres. He didn't get the number 1 defenseman role with them, but I can guarantee you that he's going to get it with the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, as you guys know, when the Blackhawks announced this trade to get Bowen Byram, I felt questionable. Well, when I first saw that the Blackhawks were going to try and make a run at Bowen Byram, I was intrigued. I was like, okay, cool, we're getting Bowen Byram. But then I see the outcome of the trade, in which the Blackhawks give up their first round, 4th overall pick in the trade. And I got upset and irate. But now I feel kind of cool about this trade once again. I feel kind of happy about this trade once again. I hope the contract is worth it, though. I will say that. I hope it's worth it. And I hope Bowen Byram's getting everything that's coming to him. I hope this trade does not end up being a bust. I don't think it will be a bust. At least, fingers crossed, not hoping for it to be a bust. So, we'll see what happens. With this new contract deal, he is now the highest paid defenseman in the NHL. Of course, the salary cap is, rising to $104 million for this upcoming 2026-27 season. And Bowen Byram is the highest paying defenseman in the NHL with that contract deal. And also, fun fact, is also became the largest contract ever given to a defenseman in Blackhawks franchise history. And Bowen Byram is coming off a career-high season that he had with the Buffalo Sabres, looking for another breakout season with the Chicago Blackhawks. But taking a look at his stats for the Buffalo Sabres from last season, he had 11 goals, 31 assists for 42 points in 82 games played for the Sabres, career high in all categories for him in goals, assists, and points. He also averaged over 22 minutes of ice time per game, demonstrating his ability to handle top pair responsibilities. And of course, like I mentioned before, he won the Stanley Cup with the Colorado Avalanche in 2022. So he brings Stanley Cup championship and playoff pedigree, because of course he made the playoffs with the Avalanche and the Sabres, looking to become that number one defenseman. I believe the Blackhawks see him as the number one defenseman. His skating ability, puck movement, and offensive creativity, offensive upside fit perfectly alongside Chicago's emerging young core, which is of course led by Connor Bedard, which I'm hoping that we can see a contract extension from him, because the Blackhawks have not extended and gave Connor Bedard a new contract deal. Of course, they signed Bowen Byram, they signed Ian Cole, I think that's his name, and they signed Cole Smith. They signed these other AHL depth players, but they don't sign Connor Bedard. And I was looking this up yesterday. Yesterday on Wednesday, and turns out that July 1st was actually Kyle Davidson's birthday, and he turned 38 years old on free agency day. Kyle, I get that yesterday was your birthday, but you could have given us Blackhawks fans a present of our own, and you could have extended Connor Bedard, but yet you don't. You also could have went out and got Patrick Kane, which I know I've been seeing the comments. Some of the posts on the NHL's Instagram page I have been commenting on, saying that Blackhawks should go after Patrick Kane. Blackhawks should, get Connor Bedard. And I seen some of you guys reply to me, especially about the Patrick Kane, where you guys were saying that the Blackhawks are going to go out and get him. Blackhawks literally said that they weren't going to bring him back. Blackhawks aren't bringing aging players. I get that. But if you take a look at it this way, Patrick Kane is the right fit for the Blackhawks, and I would like to see him mentoring Connor Bedard. He still has a production. He can still bring that offensive production. He may not be in his prime anymore, but he can still have production for the Blackhawks and can be a great mentor to Connor Bedard. And plus, I grew up a Blackhawks fan, as you guys all know. I grew up a Blackhawks fan. I grew up watching Patrick Kane. And it will be a full circle moment for me and for other people that are Blackhawks fans and also grew up watching Patrick Kane, for Patrick Kane to return to the team. So I'm hoping Kyle Davidson can get off his butt and get this done, because all these other general managers are getting stuff done. Like Mike Grier, he's doing a good job to San Jose Sharks. He's building a Stanley Cup team for the Sharks in the future around Macklin Celebrini. Or Kyle Davidson is not doing the same thing with Connor Bedard. So I'm hoping maybe we can see a contract extension for Connor Bedard before this upcoming 2026-27 season kicks off, because Kyle Davidson is not doing a good job like Mike Grier is doing with San Jose Sharks. As a Blackhawks fan, I have to say that the Sharks have the better team than us. But we want to have the better team. We want to be better than the San Jose Sharks. And I'm not saying that there's a rivalry with the San Jose Sharks, although there could be one soon with Bedard versus Celebrini, of course, both of them being from Vancouver. We could see a rivalry soon, despite both the Blackhawks and Sharks not playing the same division, but we'll just see what happens. But nonetheless, this is a good extension for Bowen Byram. I kind of knew that the Blackhawks were going to extend him after acquiring him from the Buffalo Sabres. He has 1 year left on his current contract right now, and then the new contract that the Blackhawks extended him with will kick in at the start of the 2027-28 NHL season. But yeah, those are the Blackhawks free agent signs. They signed defenseman Bowen Byram. They gave him an extension, which we all saw coming. They signed defenseman Ian Cole. They signed forward Cole Smith from the Golden Knights. They signed all these AHL depth players, but they don't give an extension to Connor Bedard. KD, Kyle Davidson, please give an extension for Connor Bedard. Please give the fans what they want. So I'm hoping to see that soon. Give an extension to Connor Bedard, please. Just please. You've been signing these AHL Connor players, but you haven't signed a top elite offensive Connor on the team. So hopefully that deal gets done shortly. Let's talk about another thing that happened on free agency day. Darnell Nurse getting traded to the San Jose Sharks on Wednesday. So a blockbuster move right here for the Edmonton Oilers, trading their longtime defenseman Darnell Nurse to the San Jose Sharks in exchange for defenseman Shakir Mukhamadolan. Hopefully I said that last name right. But they trade Darnell Nurse to the Sharks for defenseman Shakir Mukhamadolan and the contract negotiating rights for Zachary Sharp. Of course, we saw this coming. We knew Darnell Nurse was going to get traded from the Edmonton Oilers because he requested a trade not too long ago for the Edmonton Oilers. He wanted to move on. He felt like a change of scenery was needed. So we saw this coming. And for me, I already knew the Sharks was going to be the top team that he was going to get traded on. You can believe me or you cannot. I don't care. But I saw this coming. Of course, all of us saw the trade coming for Darnell Nurse to the Sharks. Actually, we all saw the trade from Darnell Nurse. We knew Darnell Nurse was going to get out of Edmonton. We knew that one of the teams that he had listed wasn't the Canadian team. He wanted to get out of the Canadian market. He didn't want to stay in the Canadian market. Felt like a change of scenery was needed. We knew he was going to get traded, but I was one of those few persons that knew he was going to be on the San Jose Sharks. Sharks were my top team that I had Darnell Nurse going to. Now, some people didn't like the outcome of the trade, but trust me, you guys are going to get a solid, good veteran defenseman in Darnell Nurse. But yeah, this trade marks the end of his 12-season tenure with the Edmonton Oilers. He had a no movement trade clause, meaning that he had to approve the trade before Stan Bowman made the trade official. So Stan Bowman said, Darnell Nurse, I'm going to trade you to the Sharks. You okay with that? Darnell Nurse waives his no movement trade clause. He says, yeah, I'm okay with that. Let's make the deal happen. And the deal happened. So no movement trade clause is when a player gets the okay to say, let's make this trade happen. If a team trades a player to a team that he doesn't feel like he's a good fit for, doesn't want to play for, he can just simply say no and the trade does not happen. But if it's a team that the player feels like, okay, I can make this work, okay, I want to go to this team, or hey, this team is good for me, he waives his no moon trade clause and he makes the trade work. That's what Darnell Nurse did with the Edmonton Oilers. Now, one of the big storylines of this trade is that the Oilers moved Darnell Nurse's entire $9.25 million annual cap hit without retaining any salary. He still has 4 years remaining on the 8-year contract deal he signed in 2021. And Oilers general manager and former Blackhawks general manager Stan Bowman said that avoiding salary retention was quote-unquote very important for Edmonton's long-term cap flexibility. So the Sharks add a established top 4 defenseman in Darnell Nurse. They add one of the NHL's most experienced defensemen in Darnell Nurse to strengthen their young blue line that is still developing. He is expected to provide leadership, physicality, and heavy minutes along the Sharks' emerging core. And take a look at his stats from last season. He recorded 7 goals, 17 assists for 24 points in 82 games. So that's 7 goals, 17 assists for 24 points in 82 games played, while still averaging under 21 minutes per game. And Mike Grier, man, oh man, is he doing a good job at GM. Doing a better job than Kyle Davidson, I might add. Which I hate to say that as a Blackhawks fan, because I want us to be the better team than the San Jose Sharks. I want Connor Bedard to have the better team around him than Max Celebrini does for the San Jose Sharks. But unfortunately, sorry guys, I thought I heard some buzz in my ear weirdly. But anyways, I want Connor Bedard to have the better team than Max Celebrini does for these San Jose Sharks. But unfortunately, I don't see that being the case. But yeah, Mike Grier continues to be aggressive with this free agency. Continues to have a better team. Earlier in the day, the Sharks also signed Jacob Trouba to, I believe, a 4 or 5 year contract extension. They also added Mason Marchment on the team now to a 5-year contract deal. So he's just adding those depth veteran players on the team with the Sharks' young core. And for Darnell Nurse, like I said, it is the end of an era in Edmonton for Darnell Nurse. Of course, the Oilers drafted him 7th overall in the 2013 NHL Draft. Played 12 seasons with the Oilers, and he played in 798 regular season games with Edmonton, having 324 points in those 798 games, 88 goals, 236 assists for 324 points in 798 regular season games with the Edmonton Oilers. He's 5th on the team in points, 2nd in games. He's the Oilers' all-time leader in block shots with 1,467 and hits with 1,692. And he has 29 points in 100 playoff games, 7 goals, 22 assists for 29 points in 100 playoff games. He was a key part of that Oilers playoff runs, including those runs to the Stanley Cup Finals in the 2024 and 2025, which of course the Oilers lost to the Florida Panthers in both those times. But Darnell Nurse was a key asset player for both runs to the Stanley Cup Final. Well, let's talk about the return that the Edmonton Oilers get. So the Oilers get a young 24-year-old defenseman in Shakir Mukhamadolan. I'm serious, guys. If I'm not pronouncing that last name right, please correct me down in the comments. I never want to get these names wrong. So if I didn't pronounce that right, please correct me in the comments. But yeah, Shakir Mukhamadolan goes to the Edmonton Oilers in a trade with Darnell Nurse. Taking a look at what he did for the San Jose Sharks last season, he had 12 points in 50 games, 5 goals, 7 assists for 12 points in 50 games with the Sharks last season. The Oilers did sign defenseman Ryan Shea to a 5-year, $4 million contract deal to replace Darnell Nurse on the team. And for Zachary Sharp, who was the other player involved in this trade, he has not played an NHL game yet. Of course, he was a 4th-round pick by the Sharks in the 2025 NHL Draft, 124th overall, 4th-round pick. He had 19 points in 37 games played for the Western Michigan Broncos last season, 5 goals, 14 assists for 19 points in 37 games played for the Western Michigan Broncos last season. Hasn't played an NHL game yet, but maybe looking to play one either this upcoming season or the 2027-28 season. We'll just have to see. But let's move on to another news that happened on free agency. Ivan Demidov, who I wish the Blackhawks would have picked, and not Artem Leshnar, but yeah, it's tough. Let Kyle Davidson missed out on not drafting him. But anyways, Ivan Demidov signs a 8-year, $9.125 million contract deal with the Canadiens on Wednesday. It is a $9.13 million contract deal. Issue had rounded it to the nearest 100. But anyways, this contract will kick off at the start of the 2027-28 season after his entry-level contract deal expires. And the extension keeps Ivan Demidov under contract through the 2034-35 season, ensuring he remains one of the franchise cornerstone players throughout his prime years. Montreal completed this deal on the first day Demidov was eligible to sign an extension, so they didn't wait too long to commit to Demidov. After an outstanding rookie campaign of the season he had, which established him as one of the NHL's brightest young stars, leading all rookies with 62 points in 82 regular season games, 19 goals, 43 assists for 62 points in 82 games this season, or last season I should say, for Ivan Demidov. He was second in the Calder Trophy votes. Of course, the Calder Trophy ended up going to Matthew Schaefer this year. And take a look at this playoff performance. Ivan Demidov had 9 points in 19 playoff games, helping the Canadiens reach the Eastern Conference Finals. 3 goals, 6 assists for 9 points in 19 playoff games for Ivan Demidov. And the Canadiens continue to build around their young core, looking to win a Stanley Cup with this core someday in Ivan Demidov, in Nick Suzuki, in Cole Caulfield, in Uri Sokoski, in Lane Hudson, in Noah Dobson, in Jacob Dobes, in Sam Montembeault, looking to win the Stanley Cup with that core one day. So another young NHL team on the horizon, and one of the best young teams in this case to watch. So Ivan Demidov is going to be viewed as a franchise cornerstone player, or at least one of the cornerstone players for the Canadiens. His elite offensive skill and creativity have made him one of the league's most exciting young forwards to watch. And alongside Montreal's young core, Ivan Demidov is expected to play a central role in the Canadiens' pursuit of Stanley Cup contention, playoff contention throughout the remainder of the decade. So just a great signing to lock up Ivan Demidov for 8 more years. And man, oh man, maybe, just maybe, Canadiens might win the Stanley Cup with the score. I hope to see them win the Stanley Cup with the score. Just see Cole Caulfield get a Stanley Cup, one of my favorite players to watch. Nick Suzuki, Lane Hudson, Uri Sokoski. That is an unreal core. Hopefully they get themselves Stanley Cup one day. Well, let's move on to another free agency signing. And this one is kind of a little bit shocking, but Freddy Andersen signed a 1-year, $1 million contract deal with the Oilers on Wednesday. Good thing I have another water. But Freddy Andersen signed a 1-year, $1 million contract deal with the Oilers on Wednesday. Of course, he won the Stanley Cup with the Hurricanes last season when the Hurricanes went all the way to the Stanley Cup final and defeated the Golden Knights in 6 games to win their first Stanley Cup in 20 years. Freddie Andersen was on that Hurricane Stanley Cup team, as you guys all know. He was a big part of that Hurricane Stanley Cup run. He played a major role in the Hurricanes playoff run to the Stanley Cup, posting a 13-2 playoff record, 1.89 goals against average, and a .910 save percentage during the postseason. I think he had like 2-3 shutouts along the way as well. But taking a look at his regular season stats, he went 16-14-5 with a 3.05 goals against average and a .874 save percentage in 35 games. Of course, Freddie Andersen, he kind of was struggling just a little bit in the regular season, and Brandon Bussi had to handle all, or at least most of the workload in the regular season. But Freddie Andersen actually rebounded, got his starting role back in the Stanley Cup playoffs until Game 4 of the Stanley Cup final, where Rob Brittamore turned to Brandon Bussi the starting goal for Game 4 of the Stanley Cup final. But no doubt in my was Freddie Andersen one of the reasons why the Hurricanes were able to get that far and win the Stanley Cup. We can't forget about the success that he had in the Stanley Cup playoffs. But the Oilers addressed their biggest need. They needed to strengthen their goaltending, and goaltending has been a problem for the Oilers, I felt like. Even though they made the playoffs, like last year, of course being eliminated first round to the Anaheim Ducks, and then they made the Stanley Cup final the past 2 years before that. Goaltending was a huge issue for the Oilers, even then the Stanley Cup final, and of course, maybe last season in the playoffs. But they strengthened their goaltending now with acquiring Stanley Cup champion and a key veteran presence in Freddy Andersen. His calm demeanor and playoff resume should make him a valuable presence in the Oilers locker room. Get the Oilers back to the Stanley Cup final, maybe. Of course, I don't know how that's going to be with Mike Babcock as head coach of the team now. Of course, Mike Babcock has an outstanding coaching resume. He has an outstanding coaching resume. But as a person, he's just awful. Like, he's not the best person to be around. He's actually the odd person to be around based on some of the stuff that he's did in years before, looking into people's phones, ranking players, like telling NHL players to like rank their teammates and stuff like that. Like, he's just an odd, awful person to be around. But his coaching resume is exceptional. It's sensational, outstanding, no question about it. But as a person, he's just so hard to be around. Like nobody wants to be around him. But he has the resume, though. So we'll see with Mike Babcock as head coach and Freddy Andersen, the number one goaltender. Can the Oilers make a run to the Stanley Cup final? I think health probably might be a big issue for Freddy Andersen because for the past few seasons, he's played in 35 or fewer regular season games because of his health and him being injured. And the Oilers are betting that Andersen can stay healthy enough to provide quality starts throughout the season and the playoffs if they do get to the playoffs, which I think they will. And if Andersen stays healthy and performs well, both he and the Oilers will benefit from the incentive-based structure. Like, they will be, a good top 10 team in the league. But his 5-year run in Carolina comes to an end. In 5 seasons with the Hurricanes, he went 98, 49, and 10 with a 2.45 goals against average and a .906 save percentage and 9 shutouts and 159 games played, 157 those games he has started. And then in 13 seasons in the NHL, in his NHL career, he went 324, 149, and 58 with a 2.59 goals against average and a .913 save percentage and 28 shutouts in 552 games. 538 of those games he has started with the Ducks, Maple Leafs, and Hurricanes. So, this is a good signing from the Edmonton Oilers. I'm forgetting who their backup goaltender is. I want to say Connor Ingram, but I'm not sure if he's still on the team now. I think it's Tristan Jarry because I think he's still on the team. But Freddy Andersen is obviously going to be the starting goaltender. And I believe either Tristan Jarry or Connor Ingram is the backup goaltender. I know it's not Stuart Skinner because, of course, the Oilers trade him to the Penguins for Tristan Jarry. And, of course, Stuart Skinner recently in free agency signed a 2-year contract deal with the Winnipeg Jets. So I know he's not on the Oilers anymore. But let's take a look at some free agent moves that the Utah Mammoth have made. They made one of the biggest splashes of this free agency day as they got Vincent Trocheck for the New York Rangers, and then they signed longtime Islanders captain Anders Lee to a 3-year contract deal on opening day of NHL Free Agency. But let's start off with Vincent Trocheck. So Vincent Trocheck is hoping to be a top 6 center for the Utah Mammoth. I think he is going to be a top 6 center for Utah Mammoth. Of course, he was acquired in a trade with the New York Rangers that sent defenseman Sean Durzi for a prospect Cole Bedwaldon. Hopefully I pronounced that last name right. To the New York Rangers along with a 2027 third-round pick. In the trade against Utah, one of the NHL's premier two-way centers, of course, Vincent Trocheck is signed for the 2028-29 season, giving Utah that long-term stability down the middle. He signed a $5.63 million 7-year contract deal with the Rangers back in 2022. He will be a UFA in 2029, which will be 35 years old at the time. He also brings in proven production to the Utah Mammoth. He's coming off a 53-point season with the Rangers, 16 goals, 37 assists for 53 points in 67 games played with the Rangers last season. He also played for Team USA at the 2026 Winter Olympics in Milan, Italy last season. And of course, Team USA won the gold medal against Canada. Jack Hughes with the gold medal goal for USA over Canada in overtime in the Winter Olympics in Milan. But taking a look at Vincent Trocheck's NHL career, he has 631 points in 868 games played with the Panthers, Hurricanes, and Rangers, 239 goals, 392 assists for 631 points in 868 regular season games with the Panthers, Hurricanes, and Rangers, and then 37 points in 56 playoff games, 17 goals, 20 assists for 37 points in 56 playoff games with the Panthers, Hurricanes, and Rangers. But Vincent Trocheck's 4-year run with the Rangers has come to an end, in which he had 253 points in 313 games played with the Rangers, 89 goals, 164 assists for 253 points in 313 games played with the Rangers, and then 21 points in 23 playoff games, 9 goals, 12 assists for 21 points in 23 playoff games. Rangers made the playoffs in 2 of the seasons he was there. Of course, he played 4 seasons with the Rangers and only made the playoffs with them 2 times. But the Mammoth paid a significant price in giving up some of their players to get Vincent Trocheck. They give up an established NHL defenseman in Sean Durzi, one of the top prospects in Cole Bedudon, and a draft pick to acquire Trocheck. Sean Durzi had 27 points in 60 games played with the Mammoth last season, 5 goals, 22 assists for 27 points in 60 games with the Mammoth last season, played 2 seasons with them as a whole, in which he had 38 points in 90 games played, 9 goals, 29 assists for 38 points in 90 games played. And then he played that 1 season with the Coyotes before they became the Mammoth. So some may even say 3 seasons because of the Coyotes moving to Utah and coming to Mammoth, but those are 2 separate NHL teams. Let's talk about Anders Lee now, as Anders Lee signs a 3-year, $5.4 million AAV extension with the Utah Mammoth on Wednesday. Of course, Anders Lee, longtime captain of the New York Islanders, played 14 seasons with them. He served as the Islanders captain for the past 8 seasons, but in those 14 seasons with the Islanders, he had 549 points in 923 games, so 308 goals, 241 assists, but 549 points in 923 games played. And in the playoffs, which 5 seasons in the playoffs for Anders Lee with the Islanders, he had 21 points in 46 games, so 10 goals, 11 assists for 21 points in 46 games in the playoffs for the Islanders for Anders Lee. He became one of the most recognizable leaders in Islanders history during his tenure as captain. And with Anders Lee vacating the seat as Islanders captain, maybe Matthew Schaefer beats captain of the New York Islanders next. He can become the youngest captain in NHL history, which I believe Sidney Crosby was the youngest captain in NHL history with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and then Jonathan Toews was second behind him. But Matthew Schaefer can become the first official youngest captain in NHL history by wearing the C with the New York Islanders. I believe he's 18, 19 years old right now. So we'll see if it happens. I would love to see it happen after the impressive rookie season that he had last year. I would love to see him rock the C for the New York Islanders. But overall thoughts on these deals for the Mammoth, obviously great deals. Both these players bring in veteran leadership, playoff experience, something that the Mammoth might need for their young forward core group. So great depth players and great veteran players to have on your team. So I really do like these deals. Let's talk about Zach Werenski now, as the Zach Werenski trade rumors have been vanished. Zach Werenski is committing to stay with the CBJ Columbus Blue Jackets. So he's not going to be traded to any other team. He's going to remain a Columbus Blue Jacket. We heard the news from Wednesday. And let me tell you how this story all got started. It all got started shortly after the NHL draft when Elliot Friedman made a post reporting that Zach Werenski and Blue Jackets general manager Don Waddell were expected to sit down and discuss Zach Werenski's future with the Columbus Blue Jackets, which sparked a lot of attention around the league. And when you hear a Norris Trophy winning defenseman that's meeting with management to discuss his future, people immediately begin to wonder if a trade could be on the table, which we all thought that as hockey fans. And there was a bunch of rumors that began circulating about several teams that could have interest in Zach Werenski, which the Tampa Bay and Toronto Maple Leafs were two of the teams that were gaining a lot of interest and were very interested in having Zach Werenski. And I think he could have been great fits for both those teams had he still wanted to move on from Columbus. For Toronto, because I'm not sure Morgan Riley is going to be on the team for next season. I think he is. I haven't heard any news about him, but he would have been that number one defenseman in Toronto if Morgan Riley was leaving. And then with Victor Hedman being absent, I think he's absent either due to personal or health reasons, but with Victor Hedman being absent, Zach Werenski could take over as that number one defenseman for the Tampa Bay Lightning, with Victor Hedman being absent for a while. I don't know what's the case for Victor Hedman. I think he's out due to either personal reasons or health reasons, but hasn't been playing with Tampa recently though. But Zach Werenski could have been that number one guy in Victor Hedman's absence. And then, according to multiple reports, the Blue Jackets and Dallas Stars discussed a blockbuster trade involving Zach Werenski. The deal reportedly got serious enough that Columbus presented to Zach Werenski for approval, so it looked like for a second that Zach Werenski was set to become a Dallas Star heading into next season. But because Zach Werenski had a full no-movement trade clause, this trade could not happen without his permission, and so he said no. He did not want to play for the Dallas Stars. Of course, we saw that post from Elliot Friedman where he said that Zach Werenski rejects a trade from being on the Dallas Stars, which could have, garnered and had a lot of attention had that happened, of Zach Werenski heading to Dallas. And then following those reports, Zach Werenski and Don Waddell met face-to-face to clear the air of the room, block out all the trade rumors and stuff that was speculating around the league. And after that meeting, they released a statement that effectively ended those trade rumors, and Werenski made it clear that he wanted to remain a Blue Jacket. And Don Waddell reiterated that Werenski is a cornerstone of the franchise, as someone that the organization wants to build around. And just like that, one of the biggest offseason rumors was put to rest, which is a huge W for Columbus, because if they had traded him, I don't know where would they go from here. And it's also easy to forget just how incredible Zach Werenski was this past season. He won the Norris Trophy as the NHL's best defenseman after posting career-high numbers while playing over 26 minutes a night against the league's tougher competition. Last season, 81 points in 75 games, 22 goals, 59 assists for 81 points in 75 games last season. He almost tied his career high, actually, which he had 82 points the year before that in the 2024-25 season with 82 points in 81 games, 23 goals, 59 assists for 82 points in 81 games. So he almost tied his career high right there. But Zach Werenski has become everything that the Blue Jackets had hoped that he could be after drafting him 8th overall back in the 2015 NHL draft. He's their number one defenseman. He's one of the leaders on the team. And arguably, he could be the face of that franchise. And players like that don't become available very often. If Columbus did trade him, like I said, I don't know where would they be, what they would do next, but it would have completely changed the direction of the organization had they traded Zach Werenski. So I don't know where would that team be if they moved on from Zach Werenski. He had every opportunity to waive his trade clause if he wanted to change, but he ended up not doing it and stayed a Columbus Blue Jacket. Now, does that mean these trade rumors disappear forever? Probably not. Both sides appear to be on the same page. Both sides appear to be mutual as for now. But there's still another interesting storyline to watch. Werenski has 2 years remaining on his current contract deal. And because of the NHL's contract rules, he won't be eligible to sign another extension until next summer in 2027. Which means that extension conversations are likely to become one of the biggest Blue Jacket stories for 2027. And if things continue progressing positively, it wouldn't be surprising to see Columbus eventually offer another long-term contract that allows Werenski to spend his entire career with the franchise. And honestly, that's becoming increasingly rare in today's NHL, where franchise players who spend their entire careers with one organization are becoming harder and harder to find. We thought Patrick Kane was going to spend his entire career with the Blackhawks. I wish that would have happened. I wish he didn't get traded to the New York Rangers in 2023. But it is what it is. We thought Jonathan Toews was going to play his entire career with the Blackhawks. Unfortunately, it did not happen. I thought as a kid that Zdeno Chara played his entire career with the Boston Bruins, but I didn't know he played for the Islanders. He played for the Senators. I did know he played for the Capitals, but I didn't know he played for the Islanders or the Senators before playing for the Boston Bruins. So I thought as a kid he was going to play his entire NHL career with the Boston Bruins, but he played with the Islanders and Senators before moving to Boston and then played with the Washington Capitals. And I think he went back to the Islanders to end his NHL career. So those franchise players are who spend their entire careers with one team or think that they're going to spend their entire careers with one team are becoming harder to find. It's going to be tough to find those players. But the Blue Jackets will love to see Werenski be one of those players who spends his entire career with that team, and we won't have to think like some of those other players I just mentioned, where we thought they were going to spend their entire career with their respective teams, and then they end up moving on to other teams. Blue Jackets hoping to get back in the playoffs. They were 7 points out of a playoff spot last season. Finished with a 40, 30, and 12 record with 92 points. 5th in the Metro, 17th in the league. We thought that Zach Werenski was going to be on the move, which would have been a huge blockbuster trade for the Columbus Blue Jackets had it happened, but he ends up staying a Columbus Blue Jacket. So, very good for him. Now let's go to another team in the LA Kings as they signed a lot of veterans for this free agency day. They didn't make any fancy moves. They didn't make any massive trades or blockbuster moves. They went out and got some key veterans. They signed Matt Zuccarello and Corey Perry to 1-year contract deals. They signed Eric Carla, I believe, to a 2-year contract deal. And these additions came after one of the biggest moments in franchise history where Anze Kopitar, longtime LA Kings captain, decides to hang up the skates after nearly 2 decades with the team. So after 2 decades with the LA Kings, Anze Kopitar hangs them up. And the Kings know that they'll never find another player like Anze Kopitar and what Anze Kopitar brought to the organization. I mean, we're talking about a 2-time Stanley Cup champion, won the Stanley Cup to Kings in 2012 and 2014. We're talking about a Selke Trophy winner. We're talking about one of the greatest defensive forwards in NHL history. We're talking about a captain who helped define LA Kings hockey for nearly 20 years. We're talking about the franchise all-time leading point scorer. And we're talking about the franchise all-time leader in games played. So, yeah, his retirement leaves a massive hole for this LA Kings team. It's going to be tough for the Kings to see, for Kings fans to see Anze Kopitar not in the LA Kings sweater for next season. It was tough for them not to see Dustin Brown. still being with the LA Kings because Dustin Brown is retired as well. And now Anze Kopitar is going to be retiring. But instead of chasing that one superstar, general manager Ken Holland focused on adding experienced players who know exactly what it takes to win. Let's start off with Matt Zuccarello. Even at 39 years old, Matt Zuccarello remains one of the NHL's smartest playmakers. He's never relied on blazing speed or overwhelming physicality. His game has always been built on hockey IQ, vision, and passing, which those are skills that tend to age, very well. And the Kings have been looking for more offensive creativity, especially on their power play and in their middle six. And Matt Zuccarello checks those boxes. He still has the ability to create offense in tight spaces, find teammates through traffic, and slow the game down when things get too chaotic. And for a Kings team that's trying to generate more consistent offense, that's an incredibly valuable addition. Now let's talk about Corey Perry, who comes back to the LA Kings after being traded from the LA Kings to the Tampa Bay Lightning last season. Now he's going to come back to the West Coast, the Sunshine State in LA, Los Angeles, California, after being traded to the Tampa Bay Lightning last season, which he had 37 points in 72 games played with the Kings and Lightning last season. 17 goals, 20 assists for 37 points in 72 games played with the Kings and Lightning. 28 of those points were with the Kings in 50 games, and 9 of those points were with the Lightning in 22 games. Honestly, with Corey Perry coming back to the Kings, it almost feels like that he finds a way to end up on a contender every single year. Of course, this was back in Dallas, where he was on the Dallas Stars during the 2020 run to the Stanley Cup Final, lost to the Lightning there in 6 games. This was in the bubble. And then in 2021, he's on the Canadiens. Canadiens go all the way to the 2021 Stanley Cup Final. They lose to the Lightning in 5 games. And in 2022, he's on the Tampa Bay Lightning. So after losing to them for 2 straight years, he actually joins them. Lightning go all the way to the Stanley Cup Final, and they lose to the Avalanche, I believe, in 6 games. And now he went to the Edmonton Oilers, went all the way to the Stanley Cup Final with them, lose to the Florida Panthers in 7 games. This was during the 2024 Stanley Cup run to the finals. I don't think this was in 2025. I believe it was in 2024. And now he's on the LA Kings, so he seems to be on these contending teams every single year. But whether fans love him or hate him, there's one thing that's impossible to argue. The guy knows how to win. Corey Perry brings over 2 decades of NHL experience, a Stanley Cup championship. Of course, he won a Stanley Cup with the Anaheim Ducks in 2007, and countless deep playoff runs. He's built a reputation as one of hockey's most effective agitators. He gets under opponent's skin. He battles around the crease. And when playoff hockey arrives, that's exactly the type of player coaches love having. Will he score 35 goals? Probably not. I mean, this isn't the Anaheim Ducks Corey Perry that we're talking about. This isn't the prime Corey Perry that he's talking about. And he actually won the Rocket of Charlotte with the Anaheim Ducks back in the 2010-11 season, for those who did not know that. But he's not in his prime anymore, so he's not going to put up 35 goals. But he does chip in timely offense while making life miserable for opposing defenses. And he'll have done exactly what the Kings have signed him to do. And the interesting part about, both these signs for Matt Zuccarello and Corey Perry, of course, the Kings picked up Eric Haula, but I'll get to him in a sec. The interesting part about both these signings is that neither player was brought in to carry this entire franchise. The Kings have already built a strong foundation. Of course, Quentin Byfield, he continues to grow into a legitimate player. Brant Clark, he's trying to develop into one of the organization's most important defensemen. At least the top defenseman once Drew Doughty retires from the LA Kings. Once Drew Doughty retires from the LA Kings, Brant Clark could probably play that number 1 defenseman role. Kevin Fiala remains one of the team's most dangerous offensive weapons. Adrian Kempe looking to become a consistent goal scorer for the LA Kings. And then the Kings themselves have a solid defensive structure in the NHL. And what they lacked at times last season was secondary offense and veteran goaltending. And that's what these signs are trying to address. And another important factor is the leadership that they have. And like I said, they also signed Erik Haula in free agency, who's built his career as a responsible two-way center. He's trusted on the penalty kill, plays a structured defensive game, and is the type of veteran coaches rely on in defensive zone situations. He's a solid face-off taker, generally hovering around the 50% mark over his NHL career, which makes him dependable on draws, even if he isn't among the league's elite specialists. Now, I'm not saying he can be Anze Kopitar. I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying that he can replace some of what Anze Kopitar has brought. He's not going to be one of the NHL's premier two-way centers, but he can replace some of those skills that Anze Kopitar had brought to the Kings, which is reliable defensive zone play, penalty killing, veteran leadership, and playing center in matchup situations. Now, it's going to be tough for the LA Kings because you got teams like Colorado, Dallas, Edmonton, Vegas in the Western Conference going to the playoffs. Feels like every single year. But if Los Angeles wants to stay in the playoff hope, if they want to stay in the playoff conversation, they can't simply hope that younger players develop. They need more proven veterans who can help immediately and make a huge impact. Are these signings risky? Absolutely, because Zuccarello, Haula, and Perry are in the later stages of their NHL careers. And, of course, age always plays a factor for these NHL players late in their careers. Injuries start to happen. Production can start to decline quickly. And that's why Matt Zuccarello and Corey Perry's contract signings are 1-year extensions and Erik Haula is 2-year extensions. Because you don't want to bet long-term on these players because you don't know if they're going to perform well or not. If the players perform well, great. But if not, at least the Kings maintain flexibility for next summer without carrying those long-term commitments. So, a really good strategy from the LA Kings. So, I really do like this strategy. And I'm hoping these veteran pieces can become, part of the LA Kings. They can put up a lot. Not a lot, but some offensive production on the team. And, we'll just see how it goes. Some other free agency and trade news. Tyson Forster signs an 8-year, $7.1 million contract extension with the Flyers, entering the final year of his 2-year, $7.5 million contract deal he signed on May 29th of 2025. This new contract will start in 2027-28 season. Jaden Schwartz, he signed a 3-year, $3.25 million contract extension with the Colorado Avalanche. We saw Devin Levi getting traded to the Edmonton Oilers along with a 2028 7th round pick. Sabres get back a 2028 3rd round pick. Boone Jenner leaves Columbus. He vacates the sea for Columbus. He goes to the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. He signs a 4-year, $5.75 million contract deal with the Capitals. The Kraken signed Curtis Douglas to a 2-year, $1.25 million contract extension. New Jersey Devils give Barry Hayden the offer sheet, so Barry Hayden could be going to the New Jersey Devils. We saw Keaton Kozar get traded to the Detroit Red Wings, so lots of stuff has happened on free agency day. But the one thing I was hoping to happen as a Blackhawks fan was for Kyle Davidson to extend Connor Bedard, but that still has not happened yet. I was also hoping for him to find a reliable top 6 winger that can help Connor Bedard. He didn't do that either. And I was also hoping for Patrick Kane to come back to the Blackhawks. Hopefully he does. Hopefully a deal gets done there where he comes back to the Blackhawks. Highly unlikely to happen though, but I'm just hoping. So childhood me could be very excited and he can finish his career with the Chicago Blackhawks, return to Chicago, being a mentor for Connor Bedard. But that's going to do it for this episode of Hockey Talk with TG Podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in as always. This was over an hour episode, but that's because we had a lot of free agency news to discuss, so that's why this was over an hour. But thank you guys for tuning in. Nonetheless, I really do appreciate it. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe on YouTube. Make sure to follow the Hockey Talk TG Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. Both of you guys have a great rest of your day. Keep God first as always. Be blessed. Enjoy your rest of your day. I'm pretty sure we'll have some more trades coming this offseason, and maybe some more of these free agents like Patrick Kane, Anthony Mantha, maybe Connor Hellebuck. Maybe he gets traded sometime this offseason. We'll have more news coming, and we'll report it here on the Hockey Talk TG Podcast. So make sure you subscribe and follow on all your podcast streaming platforms. This is the place to be for your news of the day, for your hockey news of the day. Number one podcast for all things hockey. But anyways, I'll see you guys next time for another episode of the Hockey Talk with TG Podcast. Take care.